officially on. All right. So welcome everyone to Thriving Teams in Uncertain Times. My name is Chelsea Dalzell. I am hosting this virtual event today, and we are being joined by an amazing panel of leaders who I will introduce to you shortly. I'm just going to take a quick minute so that everyone knows they're actually in the right place to put our fancy little presentation up. All righty, so thriving teams in uncertain times, how to build adaptable, resilient teams that outperform in any market. And we all know that building adaptable, resilient teams, it means you guys. So today our panel will be discussing tools and sharing some information on how to take care of yourself and take care of your teams in uncertain times, which I am sure we are in right now. So I'm going to take a quick minute and just introduce everyone, and then we'll break for a very quick video, which will sort of set the tone as to why we're here and what we'll be talking about. And then Mr. Lyle Best is going to kick us off. So on that note, Lyle Best. So today we are joined by Lyle Best, Kristin Stevenson, and Matt Devine. So Lyle is a well-known Edmonton-based entrepreneur, philanthropist, and decorated leader in business, a colonel in the Alberta Order of Excellence and founder of QuickCard. He has chaired numerous boards and initiatives like sorry, Lyle. I'm nervous. The colonel in the Alberta Order of Excellence and founder of QuickCard. He has chaired numerous boards, including the Edmonton Oilers Community Foundation, and is co-founder of Heroes Unleashed. So Lyle brings decades of experience to a new mission with Heroes Unleashed, which is helping leaders and individuals build stronger businesses, healthier teams, and stronger communities. We also have Mr. Kristin Stevenson with us, and Kristin is the CEO of SynergyLoft. Kristin specializes in turning complex problems into actionable strategies with over 20 years experience in project management, business transformation, and people-centered consulting. And finally, Matt Devine. And Matt is the co-founder of Heroes Unleashed, former CEO, turned transformation coach, and endurance athlete. So Matt has raised over $200,000 for various charities throughout rides that we'll actually be discussing today. You'll get to see a little clip of one of them. And is now the co-founder of Heroes Unleash and is at the head and the helm of transformational coaching within organizations as well as individuals. So on that note, everyone, say hello to our panel, gentlemen. All right. I am going to go ahead and share just a very quick clip of a video that was taken on the final day of a 13-kilometer ride, which was the QuickCard Ride for Change. And this is where you'll see Kristin Stevenson and Matt Devine, two of our panelists, going through it. Uncertain times obviously bring stress, and this is just a really good example of stress in the minute. And then we'll discuss what is stress, where to go with it, and what it means for you and your teams. Oh, hold on. Right, gentlemen, can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear this?
It's good.
Thank you.
He saw me tank out. He saw me hit rock bottom. He saw me the final stages of my kind of career suicide when I finally said I'm done. He then opened up to me about his challenges with his mental health and how he struggled, and I think you actually had a breakdown right in front of people.
I started working, I don't know, it was probably between 12 hours a day on one of our client sites and then another 4 hours a day plus on my company, and kept going and going and going. And in the middle of that, I lost a good buddy at 42. He had a heart attack cutting grass, and ended up kind of talking in front of a group of executives at one of our clients. And I was talking about how the team was struggling just with COVID, and I'm a very outgoing person, so isolation was tough for me. And just as the middle I was talking, after all these long days and NICSHA and everything else like that, I just broke down. I didn't know out of nowhere. I started crying. Couldn't even turn my camera back on. And then that's when I realized I need to make a change.
For me, it surfaced I had to walk away from it all. But in doing so, I lost everything. I quit the bad stuff, but I also lost the good stuff. I had no community, I had no connection, I had no purpose. But what I like though is now we're creating change and we're creating community. It doesn't have to be off the back of a 13,000 kilometer ride.
You know, having that conversation is a big part of making a difference, on top of, like, you know, eating healthy and getting out, connecting with nature, you know, getting that exercise in. It's about talking about it. And like what I was doing and lashing out and like angry in meetings and short with people, it wasn't the people that I was talking to. It wasn't who I truly was, but it was what I was at the time, because I was hurt, right? Hurt people hurt people.
So here we are. This is an example of the people that I want to influence. And this guy's successful. He's not a struggling guy. He's very successful, yet he's still struggling with mental health. So I think the deal here is it can hit anybody, but he jumped on board and he saw the results. So I think there's a lot more people out there like this that we can help.
All right. So thanks for watching that. Also, I think I saw it, Kieran. That fine piece of footage was produced by Production 71. So round of applause for how beautiful that is. Mr. Lyle Best, would you be willing to kind of kick this Lunch and Learn off with a few words?
Sure, absolutely.
All right. So, I mean, let's just start with, you have been doing this for a while and always people first. So I was hoping that you could say a few things around the value of that, the value of employee wellness, and what do you see occurring in the future if people don't start taking care of themselves and their teams?
Sure. First, let me just say I'm a colonel in the Canadian Army, not the Alberta Order of Excellence, but
I'm sorry. Thank you.
they're not going to strip me of my rank because of that. But no, for me, it's always been about giving back to the community. That's how I started my business. I grew up in a funeral home, so I got to see firsthand what compassion was all about. And it was a different time. You know, back then they didn't have visiting hours. You were just there all the time. I think what we've uncovered here by going across the country a couple of times is that there's a real angst out there, and we don't do enough to teach coping skills and showing people how to find success without, you know, drugs, alcohol, whatever. So what we've got here is sort of a continuum. So my background is in employee benefits and insurance, and a lot of philanthropy. I've chaired numerous boards, ran numerous fundraisers, and sort of raised millions. Matt has a coaching background, and he is going to talk later on about neuroscience, which is, you know, I barely went to high school, so I don't know what the hell that is, but we'll find out. And then Kristin is an established management consultant, IT person. So between the three of us, we've come up with this continuum called Heroes Unleashed, and I think that it's going to be a game changer for a lot of people. And yeah, it's just we're in a time now that's pretty up and down. We don't know what the day is going to happen when somebody down south changes his mind. And I know that we across the country ran into people who were very confused, very nervous. And I think the commonality across the country from coast to coast was that people are worried and they're on the edge, and they have not enough coping skills because it's never been taught. So that's what we hope to do here.
Thank you so much, Lyle. Thank you. And on that note, Matt Devine will have the floor. Matt, I'm just going to queue up our couple quick slides for you. And can you tell me if you see them, please, sir?
I do.
Oh, good. This is where we started. So, Matt, what is going on specifically with our brain, our nervous system? What role does stress have in all of this?
Well, first of all, I think the thing that scares me the most today was that beard in that video we just watched. That thing was pretty scary. That was after 100 days of riding. So that's a lot of stress right there. What's going on? Our central nervous system, the way we perceive the world, it's doing exactly what it was designed to do. We see things around us happening. We're receiving sensory input. Our mind processes this. And in that processing, we respond. And it can respond through movements, thoughts, feelings, even automatic body functions like heart rate, blood pressure, etc. And in that whole process, we are going to move into one state or another. And we all have heard of these before. One state is called fight or flight. The other one is called rest or digest. And for tens of thousands of years, the central nervous system has done an amazing job at keeping us alive. When we saw a lion coming at us back in the day, our perception, we would see the lion, our autonomic nervous system would fire up, we would run into our caves and hide. It saved us, it kept us alive. The problem today is that most of these perceived threats aren't going to kill us, and they typically don't go away quickly. They're always around us. So think of negative or bad news, climate change, the stock market, deadlines at work. All these things are going on around us, and our central nervous system is receiving this, and it's processing it as a threat. And it moves us into something called the confined state. And over time, this confined state, if it doesn't go away, and it typically doesn't, will start to really impact us, both physically and mentally. We've all heard the conversation around stress, what it does to us mentally, what it does to us physically. So, in a nutshell, what's happening? Our central nervous system is doing what it's always done for us. The problem is it is not evolving as quickly as the world around us. So what we're feeling now is low to moderate levels of stress that doesn't go away. And that's what really creates that feeling of being burnt out or like we're being crushed down. Any questions on that? So this slide's really powerful. If we go back to the previous slide, confined state. Just pause here for a minute and analyze that slide and think of all these things that are there. These are the symptoms of being in the confined state. I don't know about you guys, but for me, I've felt most, if not all of these. And what's worse is I feel them more often than not. This is the state most of us live in. This is the state that will create all of these horrible conditions, whether they be physical or mental. This is the state that we want to avoid. If we go to the next one, we call this state the free state. This is the state where we want to move into. And believe it or not, we have influence over this. We can actually help ourselves by moving from the confined state to this free state. And as you can see, it's a very, very great place to be. And for anybody out there that works in a company or who manages a team, imagine employees all in the confined state or all in the free state. You can imagine how much more productive, efficient that team is going to be if we can help our employees get into the free state. This will also permeate culture. If we don't help our people get into this state, if we don't help our leaders get into this state, the culture of the organization will suffer as well. So I think that is a really good explanation of what's going on and why it's so important we take back control. And I think that's the next subject. If any of my panel members have any examples of where they've been and what it feels like to be in these states, I think we all have one.
I can speak to the video, I think, Matt. This is Kristin. In the video, what kind of happened is to give a little more perspective behind the scenes. So I think you heard the name Niksha. So my buddy Niksha had passed away. This was kind of, he actually passed away. I think it wasn't kind of diagnosed this way, but essentially from stress. He was having to travel a lot for his family and things like that, and travel off his work and his away from his family. Around the same time, I think a lot of the Edmontonians on here also heard the story of Ben Stelter. So little known fact is actually Niksha was Ben's uncle. So Niksha passed away 1 month prior to Ben passing away. So all that was going on in my personal life, and we were losing kind of people around us, which is stressful enough. And I wasn't dealing with it. And Chelsea, if you go back to the previous slide, a lot of the things that I was sitting in was exactly kind of this, right? I felt like there's no path forward. I was constantly kind of, paralyzed by amount of work that needed to get done. And I hadn't dealt with the grief. And some of the tools that Matt's going to start speaking to, and even just some of the things I spoke to on the video, started allowing me to kind of change my mindset and not just see the fear and the, kind of fight or flight, but I started seeing that my mind is kind of moving into that more of that rest and digest and rest and repair. But because I was so deep into it, I didn't know what it was. And dark and heavy, the one on the bottom, the middle, definitely was one of the things that felt the worst for me. So that's a little bit of mine, just the background of the video there, Matt.
Yeah, and I think what people need to understand is that this feeling that we have on any given day, especially when we're in the confined state, you feel the symptoms. You feel depressed, you feel stuck, you feel like you have no resources, scarcity. It's just a really confining feeling, but it also makes you less effective. You lose part of the logical part of your brain. You're not as clear, you're not as concise, you're not as good at solving problems. So you'll learn later on in the presentation that when you're in this state and you're actually given a problem that you have to deal with at work, at home, being in this state makes you an ineffective person to deal with it, and it compounds the feeling of being stressed. So if we don't figure out a way of getting out of this state, it compounds and will eventually burn out or become overwhelmed. So let's talk a little bit about how we get out of this, because this is where we're going to talk about the fun things here. So we just talked about what the central nervous system does. Its key role in our biology is to take in sensory information, process that information, and take an action based on what it thinks it's seeing or experiencing, and the processing that goes on behind that sensory information. Taking action could be moving away from something, it could be moving towards something, it could be a thought, emotion. That's what our central nervous system does for us. We have to figure out a way of intervening, of working with this process. The reason why most people fail at making positive change or sustaining change is because they work against the brain. They try life hacks, go into social media, they're everywhere. This is the biology that we're all working with, and we have to figure out a way of working with it and using it to our advantage. So we have 3 powers. These 3 powers are absolutely under our control. And if we learn how to use those 3 powers, we can actually shape what the central nervous system does for us. Focus, the things we look at, that we focus on, whether they be sensory or mental. Meaning, the meaning we apply to the thing we're focusing on, and action, the action we take based on the focus and the meaning. We can actually override what is happening to us by default. We can actually intervene and help shape it. And if we can do this, rather than the world acting on us, we will start acting on the world. So it's a very powerful thing to have, and we call them the superpowers. And if you learn to use these effectively, you're going to stay or move into and stay in that free state. So I think the next slide talks a little bit more about focus, meaning, and action. But here are some highlights from, yeah, there we go, the other way. So focus, meaning, and action. If we use these three things effectively, we can focus on things that are priority to us. We can give them meanings that are beneficial to us. And based on those two, we can supercharge our actions. And we have a lot of examples to talk about here. And I think that is the best way of describing the three superpowers. So I'm going to tell a story, and then I'm going to put Lyle on the spot to tell another story that I think really show these three powers in action. I've rode across Canada twice. The first time I rode across Canada's highest peak, I had to scale it on a day. I think I was 80 days into the ride, and I had to cycle up this mountain. And if you watch the documentary Whisper to Aurora, you'll actually see video of me getting to the top of the peak. And I am absolutely miserable. And the day started that way. I woke up, I asked, what's the day look like? Matt, you have to climb a mountain. It's windy, it's super hot. I'm 80 days into this ride. I'm exhausted. I was depressed. I was angry. I didn't want to be there. But I rode up the mountain that day. And by the time I got to the top, I was absolutely miserable. Fast forward a year later, I came to the same ride, the same mountain on the same ride across Canada. I felt tired. I was just as exhausted. It was another hot day. But instead of focusing on the misery that I had to endure that day, I focused on the reward of what it was going to feel like riding up that mountain, raising money for these kids. I started to understand that by focusing on a more beneficial meaning, I could supercharge my action. And that allowed me to ride up that hill, and I was in a completely different state. The ride was more energized, I was happier, I was in the free state. And I think if you ask my wife, she'll tell you very clearly that on that second ride up the same mountain, I was a completely different person. The only thing that changed was my focus and the meaning that I was applying to the ride that day and the subsequent actions it generated. So it's a real thing that we have control over. One of my most favorite examples of this is a story that I think Lyle can tell best because it is the most salient example of how changing your focus and meaning can change your outlook on life. So I'll pause there and ask Lyle maybe to jump in here and tell the story from the first ride.
Sure. When I first met Matt, he pitched this concept to me about riding across Canada after telling me that the year before he had run 7 marathons in 7 days. So I said, so you're a big marathon guy? He said, no, I never did it before. Oh, okay. So you're really an accomplished cyclist. No, never done that before either. So I thought, okay, this guy's pretty weird, and I can relate to weird. So I'm going to jump on board and decide to sponsor the ride. And I followed him on social media, and we had a few chats, but I could watch his videos, and he was just going to lose it. I could tell right away that if this goes another couple of days like this, this thing's over. And this was very early on into the ride, the first week. So I called Matt's wife and said, tell him, set up a call for us because there's something wrong here. And I got Matt on the line and talked to him about, what he was up against. And it was clear he was thinking of quitting. And this is something that it's a skill you can use for other things too. But I said, well, whose name's on the side of the van? And it was QuickCart, my company, and all my friends that I had engaged to get on that thing. I said, well, quitting is not an option. And again, if you're going to try and quit smoking or drinking or whatever, tell lots of people that's what you're going to do, because then not just disappointing yourself if you don't. You know you're going to disappoint them. And there was a total change in Matt almost immediately. And I know there were lots of days he didn't like to be out there on the road. I saw the videos. I went and met him up in Whitehorse. Yeah, it's a tough grind, but mentally he'd got to a different place, and you can do it. It's just you got to put your mind to it. I'm a 2-time cancer survivor, and I really believe it's in your brain. How are you going to cope with that? And I had just seen my wife pass away from the exact same cancer, and so when I first got diagnosed, I went, "Holy shit, here we go!" But really quickly, I said, "I'm going to do the opposite of what I saw happen to her." And then I got it a second time. And the second time around, which was the same as happened to my wife, you normally have about a 15% chance of making it. But right away, I said to the doctors, I said, I'm not buying what you're selling. I think I'll be fine. Don't worry about it. And I have these mental exercises every day. And that was, a few years ago. So I'm still on this side of the grass. Powerful, powerful tool.
So what's really interesting about a lot of the stories that Lyle just told is, he said he doesn't, a grade 12 dropout and doesn't know much about neuroscience, but Lyle was actually practicing neuroscience. And what he didn't know was that during the early days of that first ride, I had already decided to quit. In my mind, I said, I'm not going to ride past day 4, day 5. I was already feeling my body shutting down. My mind was shutting down. And I just said, I can't go on. And I actually started to write the script, what I was going to tell people, how I was going to quit so that I didn't feel like a loser, to be very honest. When Lyle spoke to me, he shifted my focus. He shifted my focus from woe all was me, the pity party, to who are you riding for? He talked about the people that trusted me, my sponsors. He talked about the charity. And my meaning went from I hate suffering, this isn't worth it, nobody's watching, I'm not raising enough money, to I made a commitment. This is something I need to follow through. People are depending on me. I need to raise money for these kids. That shift in both focus and meaning energized my action the next day. And that action turned into be another day of riding. What was going to be day 4, day 5 quit ended up being 100 days of riding. And we almost cycled 13,000 kilometers. So when Lyle says, it's in the mind, it is in the mind. If we learn to leverage these 3 powers, amongst all the other stuff we can talk about in our program, you will transform the way you operate in life. It's very, very powerful. I don't know, Kristin, do you have any thoughts on that? I've been doing most of the talking, but any examples of where this played an impact in your life?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think one of the things that everybody else can relate to is we all have tough days. Like there's never escaping tough days. I think one of the things I'm seeing right now, and just, going to be real personal, is like one of the things we're dealing with while I'm on this call is my wife's site is under attack from hackers. They're trying to kind of go into it, right? Trying to get into the site and things like that. And, I can sit there and I can kind of look at this as being an absolute terrible thing. Or I can kind of like look at the focus of saying, this is actually kind of helping us kind of like fill up holes in our website. So one of the things when you start looking at this focus, meaning, in action is not only just kind of like trying to find the positives in the day, because some days just, for lack of a better word, suck. But I think there's something that's happening, and the reason something's happening, you can kind of look behind it and it's going to help you and kind of deal with that and process it. And I think one of my favorite stories, actually, and I'm going to pass this back to Lyle, because, there's some things I've read and, with teams and building teams is, there's one thing that makes projects, businesses, anything successful. And that's like the concept of winning teams win. You create this culture of winning. And I think Lyle's got a great story, being a part of the, 80s Oilers and things like that, was interesting kind of hearing some of that from behind the scenes that brought that same idea and mantra into one of the most successful dynasties in sports, let alone NHL.
Yeah, I was lucky. I came to Edmonton 1979, first year of the NHL for the Oilers, and I was born in Brantford, so was this other guy who was on a lucky streak for a bunch of years. Used to have my sign up coming into the city, but then he got it. Anyway, I got to work with Wayne, and it was an eye opener. I could see Glenn Sather in action. He was a very positive guy. He's the reason why most guys wear suits into the arena at night now. Back in the day, that wasn't the case. But he'd make all the guys go and buy a suit from Sam Abu Hassan. It cost about $3,000, and we had the best dressed team in the NHL, that's for sure. And it kind of carried over. And then ultimately, get that winning attitude in the dressing room resulted in going to the first Stanley Cup final against the Islanders. And it was a tough series. We lost, and Wayne and Kevin Lowe walked by the Islanders dressing room thinking that they'd all be jumping for joy and just celebrating their victory, but instead most of them were lying on the floor with ice packs, bandages, and that's when Kevin turned to Wayne and said, "That's what you got to do to be a winner." And then we went on to win, well, ultimately 5 more cups. But again, that's how the attitude, it was very pervasive, and it was team. Mark Messier was a really tough guy, and he would be a great teammate for anybody. But if you weren't pulling your weight, watch out, and he'd turn on you like a pit bull. So they didn't. We had some dark years after, as you all know, but the difference is they never tolerated losing, and they never tolerated not being pulling as one team. And if you look back into the 80s, the late 80s, early 90s, that was the downfall of the Edmonton Oilers. Now it's coming back because the guys are all hanging around together more. Last year was a great year. This year, if we can stay healthy, should be good. But again, the similarities is that everybody was just a team on and off the ice.
That's a great example of what I call community focus. So again, tying this back to the corporate world, we as individuals have access to these 3 powers, but it's not uncommon for businesses to have strategies or vision statements, and we talk about this in the program as well. And if you can get people unified around a common vision, get them focusing on that vision and applying a real beneficial meaning to that focus, you can supercharge their actions as well. So this applies both to the individual, to teams, to organizations and cultures. The other thing I want to say quickly about focus, meaning, and action is this. You need to be present. In the program, we talk about this thing called presence. Focus, meaning, and action only makes sense in the moment you're in now. You can't fix the past. It's happened. You can't predict the future. When it comes, it'll come. The more time and capacity we spend on the past or in the future, the more likely we're going to end up into the confined state because we can't control those things. And often stress comes about because we're trying to do something and we're not getting the response that we want. So stop dealing with the past, stop worrying about the future. We teach you to get into the now, operate in the moment we exist now, and use these 3 powers effectively. And you're going to have amazing outcomes as far as staying in the free state, but also being a way more effective leader, parent, teammate, whatever role you're talking about. Your effectiveness is going to rise through the roof. So with focus and meaning and action, there is a way to supercharge your focus. And we're going to talk about that right now. And we can jump ahead to the next slide. Morning primers. Maybe is there a slide on there about the RAS? There we are. So again, a little bit of science here, but I won't go too nerdy on you, but I'll highlight what this is because it's super important that we understand this. Inside our mind, our brain, we have this thing called the reticular activating system. And for ease of description, this is our focus powerhouse. It's what helps us determine what our conscious and subconscious mind will focus on. And it's really cool because it acts as a filter that filters out 4 million bytes of information. Oh, sorry, 40 bytes of information from 40 million bytes. Now, imagine if we don't learn how to leverage the RAS. We're bombarded by information. If we don't learn how to effectively recruit this amazing piece of our mind, it's just going to get programmed for us. What we have to do is learn how to program the RAS so that it's focusing on the things that we want it to focus on. And I could give you a million examples of when this comes into play, and we'll get into some of those right away. But here's what's really neat about the RAS. Once you program it, you are programming it with things that are important to you. So think of things like daily goals, long-term visions. You just may want to find joy or peace. You're going to identify those things that are important to you. You're then going to program your RAS. You're going to tell your RAS, this is what I want you to focus on. So these things that you're wanting your RAS to focus on get embedded into your subconscious mind. The subconscious mind, in conjunction with the RAS, then filters the world around you and says, these things are important based on what we know, based on what's inside the RAS. So instead of dealing with everything, you're only going to focus on those things that are important to you. They'll get elevated to your conscious mind. So now you're operating with a lot less noise. You're more focused on the signal, those things that are important to you. The trick is we need to program our RAS because if we don't, the world will program it for us. And here's where it gets real scary. If you think about getting out of bed in the morning and you flip on your phone, what is the first thing you see? Bad news, social media, the latest, greatest disaster. These are the things that your mind immediately gets programmed around. What does that do? It flips on our fight or flight response state, and guess where we start our day? In the confined state. And that is a horrible place to start the day. So now we're going to talk a little bit about how we can use the RAS to start our day off, focusing on the things we want, but more importantly, being in the free state. So maybe we can flip to the next slide. And I know, Kristin, you took the program and you had some really interesting comments about the program. Most of them were good. But for you, this was an area that was very impactful. So maybe you could, kind of give us your experience before morning primers and programming the RAS and after morning primers programming the RAS.
Yeah, for sure. So kind of like you said, Matt, it's like before when I was at my worst, and the part of that, the video that I was describing, I was waking up and I was having a shower, brushing my teeth. And then at 6:30 in the morning, I am going onto my computer and it's already a slew of things I have to do for work, right? And regardless of, me doing that slew of work was going to be there. After this course, one of the things I ended up doing is, so part of these primers that Matt talks about is it kind of having a vision statement. And actually, I'll read my vision statement out to everybody. So reading my vision statement every morning is one of the first things I did. Doing a morning meditation and morning gratitude with my wife are the three things that absolutely changed my life, right? Exercise, eating great, all those different things, those helped. The one thing that's like these small changes that made the biggest change for me was doing this. So for the vision statement, this is mine. It says, I'm a confident CEO filled with love, for everything around me, amazed at all the demand and all the good we're able to do in our community. I'm constantly growing my golf game and I'm consistently on the men's night leaderboard. I am fit and healthy and continuing to grow my muscle mass and happy with kind of my body consistency. I am the best husband, uncle, friend, cat dad I've ever been and created a loving household that gets better every day. I love myself unconditionally and I strive every day to create a better me. Part of the thing is that I think anybody in business says, and even Lyle talked about kind of business in the old days, you know, business owners, whether you're, women, men, or whatever else, you're always kind of perceived as saying having to have like this everything is together and you got it all figured out. And Lyle can attest, and I can attest too, is you don't. And as much as I probably put on a funny face and, have a lot of things covered in humor, I have shitty days too. And I think these things are what made those shitty days go away and a lot less. The morning gratitude actually was one of the biggest things that was easy because there's so much to be grateful for, just sitting around, having a house over my head, being healthy, with my friend dying and things like that. I took these kind of negative things and started actually finding gratitude for it. Even when I lost one of our bigger clients in the last year, I found the gratitude that's been able to allow me to kind of start focusing on some other clients. I've grown our business faster than I ever would have imagined to. So it's taking this kind of focus away from fear and work and all this other stuff and just kind of finding these kind of like little wins in the morning, just like the 80s Oilers or anything else like that. You create this winning in yourself and give yourself some grace and love yourself. It absolutely changes your world around.
Yeah, that's awesome. And what I like about this, guys, is that we're not just saying these things because I call it foo-foo science, like the latest, greatest life hack. You go into social media, gratitude meditation. The fact is, this is all very real. Now that we understand the way the brain works, these tools really do change not only our perception of the world, but how we feel. Morning primers are a great example of this in action. So the RAS is like a whiteboard. In the morning, if you go to sleep right, and we'll talk about that in a second, you have the power to program your RAS. In other words, write on the whiteboard what you want it to focus on. So Kristin mentioned the concept of a vision statement. That is a completely separate topic that you learn about in the program, but the vision statement is very important because it's really what is important to you. So when Kristin got up in the morning, read his vision statement, guess what got written on the RAS? His vision statement. It gets buried in his subconscious mind. Here's where it gets really cool. The subconscious mind is now solving problems for him. It's now trying to find a path forward, moving him towards his vision. And you can have more than one vision. You can have multiple visions. You can have a personal vision and a work vision. So what Kristin has done is he's recruited a subconscious mind to work in the background. And because the RAS knows what's important, what's written on the whiteboard, it's going to block out noise for Kristin. It's going to only allow things in that are important to him. That's programming the RAS. The other really cool thing Kristin mentioned is this concept of gratitude. And we have a long list of primers that we can go over in the course. You'll start to use them more and more as you get deeper into the course. But the one that he mentioned was gratitude. It sounds great. Everybody talks about gratitude meditation, but the science behind gratitude is that you're actually reminding yourself that you have an amazing life. There's things in your world that are actually really great. The fact that we all get up every morning and we can walk and we can talk is just one of those things. If we remind ourselves of those items through gratitude meditation, guess which state we're more likely to be in? We're more likely to be in the free state. So Kristin is doing two things with his primers. He's writing on the whiteboard what he wants to focus on that day, but he's also setting himself up for a very productive, fun, happy day. And this is why these morning primers are so important. I can't stress to you how often I've gotten out of bed and the first thing I did was flip on the radio or the TV or my phone. And what am I hit with? The stock market, the earthquake, the plane crash. These things all exist. And I'm not saying to ignore them. what we're trying to do is focus on those things that are important to you that you can control. And if you focus in on those things and block out a lot of this negative noise that you can't control, you're going to exist in that free state more often than not. And not only are you going to become a more effective, happy person, but honestly, you're going to live longer. Living in the confined state causes stress. Stress causes disease, both mental and physical. And we can go into that in a completely separate webinar, but this is a game changer. So leverage your 3 superpowers, learn to use them effectively, and start to get into the practice of morning primers. These 2 topics are day 1 and day 2 of the 40-day program that we have. So you just understand that there's so much more behind this. But if I was to start doing something today, these are the 2 things. Anybody else out there, Lyle, Kristin, any other comments on that? We've unpacked a lot in those 2 slides, so I'll stop there for a minute. Chelsea, I know you have a very stressful life. Maybe you can comment on this as well. But for me, these starting the morning off with my primers has been a game changer. No questions? Okay, let's move forward and let's talk about stress. That's why we're all here, right? So I think stress gets a bad name. In actual fact, stress is very good. We need stress in our lives. Stress, what keeps us alive, what motivates us. The more often we get through stress, the more resilient we become. And quite frankly, think of going to the gym. What are you doing? You're stressing your body. It's that very process of stressing your body that makes us fitter. So why does stress get such a bad name? Well, what's bad about stress is when it's constant, when it's that low, moderate level of stress that just lasts for days and weeks. If we don't get out of that cycle, that will lead to a feeling of being burnt out, and ultimately we're overwhelmed. So stress isn't bad by itself, but when it's in a constant low to moderate level that's left unchecked, it can really impact us, both mentally and physically. So what do we need to do with stress? We can't get rid of it. We know in some cases it's healthy, but we can learn to deal with it more effectively. How do we deal with it more effectively? We get into the free state. If you remember back when we talked about free state, I said that in that state, you have more access to your logical mind. You're more capable, you have more energy, you see more resources, you can find solutions quicker. This state makes us way better at dealing with stress. If you're in the confined state and you're hit with stress, it's like getting punched in the face. So the best way of dealing with stress isn't praying that it goes away. It's getting into that free state. And we've already talked about how we do that. We use our 3 superpowers, and we make sure that we're in the free state. So don't think stress is completely bad. It's always going to be there. In so many cases, it's actually quite positive. What we need to get better at is how we deal with stress. And the best way of dealing with stress is being in a free state. So all of this said really makes sense for the individual. But as we head towards the finish line of this webinar, how does this relate to companies and organizations? Heroes Unleashed's philosophy, along with SynergyLoft, we believe that we have to start with the people. No matter what you do within an organization, you could have the best culture, you could have really great leaders, but if the individuals that walk through the door in the morning are in the confined state, no matter what the culture is, no matter what the leaders are like, those individuals are going to make the work environment toxic. It's going to break it. So we have to understand that we need to help the individuals. We need to help them get into the free state. Organizations and leaders, their role is to keep those people in the free state. So whatever we do, we don't want people walking through the door who are happy, healthy, fit, in that free state and have them run into leaders or a culture that moves them back into confined state because you're breaking people. And I know Lyle's got some really interesting feedback on this because I heard Lyle once say, healthy people make healthy companies. And I think that is a very, very true statement. Lyle, I don't know if you have any more to add to this. You've been around the game for a long time. You've seen the good, the bad, the ugly. So, where do you think this is all going, and what are companies' responsibilities?
Well, a couple things. We always think we're living in the worst times or the best times, depending on your perspective. And I turn on the TV and I see the kids in grade school practicing active shooter training, and you go, "Holy shit, that's terrible! How are they going to ever come out of this?" And then I think back to when I was going to grade school, and the air raid siren would go off, and they would tell us to get underneath our desks. Which, if any of you know anything about physics and science, it is a perfect place to be when there's a nuclear bomb. Um, you know, that was a bad time. I see the issues going on with Donald Trump, and I lived through Watergate and Nixon, and every time you see something bad happens today, I can think back to, oh yeah, we had the very similar thing. We had the Vietnam War. Um, they got There's so much stuff that's similar, and how do people get out of it? So again, what I always used to stress with my staff was, if you got a problem, come and talk to me about it. If you see, and we're very good at giving back money to the community. If you see a cause out there that you think is important to you, come and tell me, and we'll take care of it. Um, when I left last year when I retired, um, I had about 7 staff who had been over 30 years with me, and that's pretty unheard of in most small business, especially today. But a lot of it was because we had constant communications and thought like a team. We had the same goals, and um, yeah, where's it going? Again, I keep hearing that the kids today are not going to be able to make it. I just came from Nate earlier this week. There was 100 small business companies that were being started up by business students at Nate. We're gonna be just fine. Um, there's always going to be free riders, and there's going to be guys who make the bus they ride on. So, I think that's where you just got to stay in the positive, stay in that space that lets you see things in a different way. Um, yeah, I've had a lot of different things happen in my life. Um, and it's like they say, if you got lemons, make lemonade. I had a lot of lemons in my life, but also made a lot of lemonade. So
The neuroscience of making lemonade. So what I love when I can sit and have a coffee with Lyle, and he's got all these really cool stories, and I can make these connections to neuroscience. So in my opinion, one of the reasons why I've got so much respect for Lyle is because he represents to me what that leader needs to look like. He creates that culture. I call it the free state culture. Great mentorship. And I think that's the responsibility organizations and leaders have to have today. I think the one thing I'd say that we should change that is worse today than it has been, we now know how the mind works, and we have an option to leverage it and recruit it more effectively. So as leaders, we can become better because of the science. As organizations, we can create better cultures because of the science. We can help our employees get into the free state and stay in the free state. So often, and I know Kristin has an example of this as well in his life, we've been beaten up so badly in our professional careers because the culture was toxic and the leadership was toxic. So no matter what I did as an individual, I could walk through the front doors feeling completely fit, healthy, in the free state. That organization would crush me down. And that's what I think we're responsible for now as an organization is trying to help our employees get into this free state. Kristin, any thoughts from you on this subject before we wrap it up with any closing comments?
Um, No, I think like, yeah, no, I think you kind of covered most of it, Matt. I think the big thing is like I say, that gratitude is an easy kind of like accelerator for me is you when you're having a bad day, there's always things to be grateful for. And even some things like for me, like say like losing the client, there's sometimes things happen for a reason too as well. And if you look at kind of the negative, you'll continue to find more of it. Or if you try and find the positive, you'll see more of that too as well. And it's like that's that writing on the whiteboard. So, you know, it's okay to have a bad day, give yourself some grace, but also too as well, it's easy to fix it with some small little tools that kind of come from these courses.
Awesome. Chelsea, I think we're pretty much at the finish line. What's next?
There's a big bunch of thank yous, I think, is what's next. Gentlemen, thank you so much for that. It is time for questions, though. Anyone that would like to ask our leaders or a panel any questions at all? This is a rare opportunity to have these gentlemen in one room, you guys. Okay, well, if something comes up, feel free to raise your hand, your Zoom hand, come off mute, anyone. And also, I will make sure that it's very easy to find us. So the same way that you arrived here with a Zoom link, I will send you an email, everyone, with a wrap up of everything, or as much as I possibly can fit into one email, wrap up of this conversation, as well as any, oh, we do have a raised hand. Brian, you can go ahead and just pop off mute if you'd like. Yep.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. Well, no, I just wanted to say thanks. I really appreciate the information, and I'm looking forward to doing the course starting tomorrow. And great job. A really, really informative webinar and a lot of great information. So thank you.
Thank you, Brian. We'll talk very soon, my friend. Fantastic. I would just like to remind everybody as well that if you know of anybody that's struggling, whether it be a small business or an individual, we are giving away a free coaching session if you were part of today's webinar or a organizational assessment. But listen, Heroes Unleash has a philosophy to help people. So if there's anybody out there that could use a bit of a leg up and maybe achieving some positive change in their lives, please have them reach out. We'll always have a conversation and see if we can't help somebody. So that's our mandate. We've got some big announcements coming soon. We're very excited about, but I can't say too much more than that. So stay tuned. And yeah, I look forward to talking to everybody very soon.
Thank you so much, Matt. And there will be links in all of the emails for you guys to book your sessions or your corporate assessments. So make sure to do that. And thank you everyone for joining us. And Lyle, Kristin, and Matt, thank you so much again.
Pleasure.
Thanks for joining
Thanks
on.
Okay, bye for now.
Bye.